Bob. Yep. Hey everybody, I'm Shane. How's it going?
Hello, I'm Chris at PDQ.com.
And welcome to PDQ and A. It's the week of Patch Tuesday, so in an effort to not burn too many calories by planning anything, we just go ahead and mark this one as a PDQ and A.
For good reason. Support, pour glass, enjoy.
Yeah, we get pretty hammered on Patch Tuesday, so I hope it went well for you. And if you are a sysadmin that actually practices some self-control, then perhaps this weekend we'll hope it will go well for you and you just didn't blast everything out. But either way, we're going to go ahead and move on to let's go ahead and move on to the actual PDQ and A. Let's go ahead and throw some questions down.
Sweet.
Greetings! I have PDQ Agent installed on a non-domain computer. It connects to inventory just fine. However, when doing Flash for IE update or Windows update, it says running and then times out. Is there something I am doing wrong? Sincerely, Joshua E.
Question I would have is when you're doing the deployment, what credentials are you using?
That's the first one, yeah.
It's very important. And if we're talking about, so this is a non-domain, most likely you're not most likely, you're going to need to use a local account, a local admin account on there. So timing out, I guess that's the first one. I would probably request a follow-up. Do you want to add anything to that, Colpster?
Yeah, we have seen some customers having issues with the new Deploy agent integration. It's fairly hit or miss, so if you're running into this, please contact support.
Is this on non-domain or just in general? Because he's talking specifically about a non-domain computer.
Both, as far as I know.
Okay. Yeah, hit us up at support, Joshua. Sorry about that, man.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
Dear Shane and Chris, what would cause a computer with the agent installed to never update in inventory? I deployed an application and a week later it hadn't reported as installed. Once the agent was uninstalled, the computer updated and moved to the correct collection. Thanks, Brian, uppercase G.
First thoughts I have is, this is kind of seems really obvious, but it's just one of the questions that I have to ask. After installing it, did you scan with the application's scanner? Because if you don't have one of the scan profiles set up on a timer, by default, the standard ones for 1 week, if you've changed that or you don't have something that's going to scan after you install something, you don't have scan after deployment configured in Deploy, it's not going to show that you have an application installed.
Yeah, we'll just, at this point, in case you don't have this, go ahead and show the screen. To do a scan after deployment, you can do it at the deployment level, but generally we recommend that in preferences, under deployment. Are you guys going to show the screen?
Sorry,
JJ smoking a J back there. What's going on? Go to press. So you didn't see what I did. Go to preferences. You can hit Control Comma, or just go to preferences under options, and under the deployments page, you will see scan after deployment. And then the scan profile is obviously fairly important. You want to make sure that whatever scan profile you're using includes the scanner for applications. Yep. And then you can modify this at the package level or the deployment level to say, actually, I don't want to scan because I'm just doing a reboot, or I'm just installing something that does a service, so make sure to scan services, et cetera, et cetera. But if you had this set, Brian, and in fact, even if you tried to scan it after the fact and it had the agent and it wasn't working, that would be an agent that's just not responding. And you might need to uninstall, reinstall it. If the problem persists, let us know. We certainly have a lot of people that do use the agent and are getting updates, so we want to troubleshoot a little further.
Dear Shane and Chris, what is your favorite feature that many users may not know about? Thanks in advance, Patrick P.
Well, I wouldn't say Shane and Chris, maybe Shane and or Chris, perhaps, because we probably will give you a different answer. I'll let Chris go for this one.
Well, first and foremost, I'm going to say what usually Shane says when talking about, what's your favorite band? Well, I don't have a favorite band. I don't have a favorite feature.
I have a favorite band. Everybody knows it. Yeah. My favorite musician is Tom Waits.
Well, you specifically. I don't have a favorite band. Well, anyway, my point is,
that point is moot.
I have quite a few favorites.
I just crapped all over it.
It's less of a point, more of a in the past now. So with the feature that people don't know about as much, I would recommend watching our webcast. We've done webcasts on this before, but one of my favorite things to do in both, well, specifically the inventory, because I really love inventory, is when you have any sort of grid visible, you can hit Control F and pull up a filter that's specific to this particular controls, this DevX control, and you can do fancy filtering with this. Mm-hmm. So in the case here, if I wanted to show two different computers here, like in this case I see Beth and Morty. If I just want to see Beth space Morty, really quickly I can narrow that down to just Beth and Morty. You can't do that with the other filter that we have in the top right.
Yeah, if you do that with go ahead and circle that one. If you go ahead and do it with the regular filter, type in Beth space Morty, it's going to say I'm looking for something that has Beth space and Morty in there. Okay. So this is like the advanced, you're saying the advanced search, which is Control F.
And that is one of my all-time favorites. The other one, because I'm going to say two here, has to do with tools. And this isn't so much a hidden feature so much as underutilized, I think. Everything regarding tools, especially in recent versions of inventory where we have remote tools, not just tools that run locally, is the ability to have any script, because as many of you may know, I'm a PowerShell guy. I really, really love eat, sleep, and breathe PowerShell. Mm-hmm. I love to write my own scripts, whether they're a wrapper for another application or not, to be able to interface with the targets that I have in inventory. And I don't have an example up here, but I can write a new tool. I can target it locally, which means the application runs here, but then I could, if the application is able to interface with the remote computer, let's say the event viewer, we have that built in.
So if it's local, it'll execute on the server,
correct,
on your PDQ server, but that the content of that script or tool could have remote features that go out using PowerShell or whatever to reach. Or you could also just write a tool, run it remote.
Yes, exactly. And specifically, because we used to see this question a lot with GP update. People would write a tool back when they were just local tools, like here, and write GP update. When it ran, they'd select a bunch of computers in their collection, run GP update, and think, okay, I just ran GP update on 1,000 computers. No, you didn't. You ran 1,000 times on your computer. Just throwing it out there. So now that we have the remote functionality, I can do that, and it's almost like a little mini deployment that goes over to the targets and runs there from their perspective. And that is, if people don't know that, please check it out, because it is wonderful and very powerful.
This is when we combined the old remote command with the tools and kind of merged them together. So obviously anything, if you're running in the run type remote, anything that you run out there, in this case we know GP update is going to exist, but if you're running a command remote, that command does have to be accessible on that target computer.
Right.
Whether it's in the path or if you specifically put a path, if you have a script that you've run, if it doesn't exist out there and you're running this the run type remote, it's going to fail.
Yep. But anyway, those are on the spot two of my favorite, not so apparent features. So anyway,
we'll go ahead and stay there. If we have to switch, we'll switch.
No,
we'll take that. We'll take that as read. I love tools as well. So that's why I like your tool. Let's go ahead and ask the next question.
I like tool.
Dear Shane and Chris, in the latest version of PDQ Deploy, are error conditions for steps handled differently? I have some nested packages returning errors regardless of the state of the new checkbox for condition inheritance. Thanks, Billy Z.
I'm trying to process this one.
I'll pull that up.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm just thinking.
So we might have to create a nested package here. And Colby, while we're reading this, if you want to pipe in, Colby is our phone a friend, as is often the case. Colby, do you have anything you want to add?
I think I have seen a couple of tickets come through about this. I don't know if we've figured out exactly what's going on, because I thought we tested this.
It's always a good
Famous
time.
last words.
I thought we tested this.
So what is 7fire here?
I don't know.
Firefox and 7zip. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm just going to create a
nested package, all right.
So here, well, one of my first thoughts come to, what condition at the package level or at the step level for nested packages, so that it will use the conditions on the nested package. So I don't think that we necessarily changed how the errors are handled, but we did change how the conditions apply at that particular step. So my guess is that it has to do with that, and maybe from an existing package that got upgraded to a new version. Maybe there's something there. My suggestion personally is to hit up our solutions team.
Was he using the used nested package conditions, or was he specifying custom conditions for each nested package?
Did it mention that in the question? I guess I may have missed that.
Did you want that question back up?
Yeah, or else we can just say, you can see this feature here. Go ahead and send it to, okay, now here we go. In the latest version, I have some nested packages returning errors regardless. Okay, so he's tried both, the state of the new checkbox for condition inheritance. Returning errors. Well, it's going to return an error. It's going to return an error if an error is encountered. It's just, are you saying it's not running the conditions that you're thinking it's going to run?
Right. What is the error? I mean, I guess that'll help point us and you in the right direction. Because if it's a warning and shows, hey, this, I mean, correctly stop from continuing because the condition was, false. That's good. But if it's an error that says, hey, I've exploded, help me. I mean, that will put us in a different direction.
Yeah. Please give us some more information if you don't mind.
Dear Shane and Chris, we've had a few applications that we find months later require the original source install MSI to uninstall, which was in the deploy runner and no longer available. Any suggestions on how to avoid falling into that pit? Thanks, Kathleen F.
Yes, there's actually a feature. It's one of those not used as much features, mostly because that's an MSI. What you're talking about, maintaining that source path. That is generally fairly old behavior. That was really, really predominant when MSIs first came out. You'd see it all the time. Yeah. In this case, let's say you've got an MSI step, you got an install step that runs an MSI. If you're going to need to keep that available for changes or anything like that, TechSmith Snagit is a big one that still does that. What you want to do is go to the options of that step and click on the installation requires source. And what that does is it basically takes that MSI file and the corresponding setup files and just keeps that on the target and actually installs from that path so that anytime you modify it, it has that available. It's something that you don't have to do a lot. Now, for those computers that currently have that problem, there's a good chance you can run an inventory scan using a registry scanner and look for the particular key for that application, and you might see the source path, and it's going to have a path to the runner. You can place that MSI out on a UNC and then use PDQ Deploy to push out just a registry. You can use an install step to run a reg command and just update all of the source, that value, that source target with the UNC path, and then you should be good to go. That's kind of how you take care of it for those that have already had this affected.
It's super easy to do because we're pulling all this information from that same uninstall string location, whatever that is. I forget exactly the full path to that. Mm-hmm. But there's so many options there that you can change. This is just one of them. Easy.
Yep. Installation requires source.
Yep.
Dear Shane and Chris, is there any way of limiting custom fields to specific machines? I only want to see a field for allowed reboot time for servers and nothing to display under custom fields for desktops, as the field is irrelevant. Thanks, Ian S.
Not in the collection window. If you create a custom field and then you want to show it in your collection window, it will show up all the time. What you can do is in a report, you could say, show me computers with this custom value that aren't null or aren't blank. And in that case, the report would only show those that have a value in there. But if you're looking at this, this main console or a collection window, and you decide to show that column, remember to show columns, you just click this little customize this grid button right up here in the corner, or go to view. You can also do it in view. And you would add those hidden columns that you see here over to the visible columns. Anything that you create that is a custom field will show up by default as a hidden column. You'd move that over, but yeah, you are going to always see that column on your collection windows. You're going to want to attack this from the standpoint of a report.
It's a good way. And if you ever do this from PowerShell, we have some cool blogs out there showing you how to interact with PowerShell, getting data that isn't easily accessible and then kind of pumping that into those custom fields. One of the techniques I've used in the past is to, rather than rely on the null value of it not being set yet, is to set everything to a known value of, not applicable or something. and then overriding at that point. So at least you know if a machine gets added later to your console, to your database, that you know that it hasn't been even looked at or even addressed. So there's a couple things you can do with that.
I love how there's almost always well, you can do it with PowerShell.
Well, yeah.
Fantastic.
The default answer, yes. Should you? That could be a toss-up.
Dear Shane and Chris, is there any issue having two sets of credentials that have the same username? Our local admin password is different for workstations and servers, but the username is the same. Thanks, Sean. Hey, I just got married. S.
Hey, yeah, look at the photo. All right, Sean, what you're going to want to do, this is a problem we've seen. It's not a problem. There's a solution. There's a native solution. But yes, we had a client that they had a bunch of hotels, and every hotel, they weren't on a domain. Every hotel had a different administrator password for the server that they manage, but they were all called administrator. So what we've done in both programs, when you go to your credentials and you go ahead and add a credential for a local administrator. So you're going to go ahead and delete that domain field and type in administrator, and we'll call this an administrator for the Boise office. What you'd want to do in the description is just put Boise office. All right, and say okay, and then do the same thing, add another set of credentials, and we'll do this. We'll see if he does this one. Do Chilai, New York. See if he spells it right.
No, we're gonna do.
It's spelled like chili.
My wife's hometown.
Okay, so you're gonna go out to Japan. Japan. So notice you'll see the description, and when you actually choose the how you want this deployed, you'll see the description there, and that will help you differentiate it. Now, one thing I would recommend is that you actually change that scan user in inventory to the appropriate administrator account. So all the computers that have this one administrator password, set those credentials there, and then in deploy, say use inventory scan credentials for deployment. That way you don't have to. That way you can actually mix and match multiple credentials in the same deployment.
Yep. This is the easiest way. While Shane was talking, I was just showing you, for those that followed along with my clicking and circling, this is how you do it. We added these credentials in inventory, so I just decided to show you the scan user way of doing this, but you can do the same for when you do like a deployment. So, same thing.
Cool.
Good question.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. In PDQ Inventory Free, I have to click on Collections for them to update the membership. Being able to quickly glance at collections in inventory to have an idea of what PCs are in what collections is not possible, as I have to go through the collections and click each one. Is this normal, or should collections update their memberships in the background, and maybe it's an issue with my setup? We have around 600 endpoints. Thanks, Nathan B.
Hi, Nathan. Now, this is a question we get often, and we apologize. We do process membership in the background all the time. It's constantly going. However, when you click on a collection, what it does is it actually puts that scan or that processed membership right to the front of the queue. So that's why you might deploy an application, and within a few minutes you click on that, then you'll see those numbers get modified. It does get processed in the background, but every time you click on it, it just updates that. So here's an important thing to remember. What pushes that to the front of the queue? Number one, clicking on the collection. But also, if you're using a deployment and you're saying deploy to this collection, link to this collection, any process of PDQ looking at the membership bumps that to the front of the queue. So we've shown this on the webcast before, where we'll push out an application, and before that collection has a chance to update, we will say deploy, like for example, machines that don't have the latest version of Chrome. We push out the latest version to a bunch of machines, and then before we click on that collection, the other collection, to show that it updates, we deploy to that. And we will see that it deploys to the correct number, because before it pulls up that membership, it puts it to the front of the queue. It does get it's a little confusing, as the fact that when you click on, every time you click on a collection, it says I'm updating the membership. but it is constantly updating in the back. That being said, if it is taking a long time, you might want to look at, maybe more memory. Definitely, if you can, everybody throw your database on an SSD. If you can have, especially inventory, if your inventory can be on an SSD drive, it's going to be much faster. That's just how it is. But it is we constantly are updating collections in the background. And just so you know, the priority, we update your custom collections first, and then collection library collections second.
Yes.
So those do fall a little lower in the priority.
Yep. So long story short, rest assured they are being updated.
Especially when you're saying, "Hey, I've got to deploy to these. I want to, or I got to run I want to run a report against this collection." All of those reference that collection and immediately put that to the front of the queue.
Dear PDQ guys, in PDQ Deploy Enterprise, we have auto download set to manual. While it used to work, the approvals button next to package library is grayed out. We can still go to the package library and click the link there, but it would be easier the other way. Thanks, Dandy Donnie W.
I would like to know, is this for all of your packages, so that if you were, I don't know if we have, we have one auto download approval waiting. So we go to the updates. I can say highlight this and say approve now. If it's grayed out, please let us know if one of the version fields is blank. We've seen that a few times. It's fairly rare, but you should be able just to hit the approve now if that's what you're talking about. If not, please write into us and ask. So I can go ahead and say, Google Chrome, here's the latest one. I'll just go ahead and approve it now. And notice it's gone, and you see right over here that that's getting updated.
Yeah.
So if there's, I have seen where one of the version fields is blank, and let us know so we can isolate. That's been really hard to duplicate, and it's fairly rare.
I think they're talking about the approval button in the toolbar, and that was fixed in Deploy 17.
Oh, thank you very much, Colby. Thank you very much.
This is why we keep
Colby understands questions better than I do.
He's good at reading, we're not.
Dear Shane and Chris, I read over the PDQ best practices for credentials, but what are people doing? A service account with domain admin, or what? Or something, or what? Kyle, I dig the shades and the hat, A.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I've got a thought on this, and if you can do this and you have this environment, you totally should, because I love this. So notice when we set up credentials, you'll see here Laps. If you can set up Laps, I highly recommend Laps.
If Laps is enabled in your, and we do have videos and webcasts on setting up Laps.
It's super easy. It's super straightforward. Well, some of the documentation that Microsoft has is not super straightforward, but they have like a doc file that's just odd. But I mean, it's as easy as saying add Laps here, you specify your user, and then the rest of the information that you need. And that's the lap user that you have set up for.
What about for if they're using the agent and they have an external agent or anything like that?
Well, with that, you're going to, best bet's probably local account, just because you can ensure before they go remote that this account will always be there and have those credentials. You don't have to worry about cache credentials or anything. Mm-hmm. But that would be me.
Laps is part. Now, when you say service account, I want to make sure you're not using the proper noun. Before Microsoft introduced the proper noun of service accounts, it was kind of known as, the nomenclature meant there is a user account with a very complex password that is set to never expire, and this would usually be the account that would run your Exchange or your SQL. This goes back in several years, and that's the kind of, when I would say service account, that's what I would mean. I would say we have a lot of customers that everything's in a domain. They'll create like a PDQ admin account, very complex password, set it to never expire, but it's not the same as a now available Microsoft service account, which is kind of similar to Laps. We don't interface with that. So if everything's in a domain, yeah, go ahead, create a service account that has admin privileges, make a very complex password, and set it to never expire, and you should be good to go. And then when you do change it, maybe once a year, then you'll have to change it in your credentials of your programs. But that is a fairly popular best case practice. It just kind of depends. If you're using Laps and your machines are in a domain, that's also a great way to go.
Dearest Shane and Chris, we have multiple techs that can create or modify packages in PDQ Deploy. Is there an audit trail to see who has created or modified a package and the date it was done? Thanks, Tim I.
We create there's kind of a trail on creation. I believe it's something that's in the database. Do we track that? We track the user that created it. I think we do.
Deploying it, yes. Creating it, I'm not positive. I'd have to
Oh,
go.
we added that, but I don't think
I'd have to poke
modifying
around.
it. I don't think modifying it we do.
Yeah. If you're SQL savvy, you could probably create your own triggers for this and go down that route. Mind you, this is not in any way supported
It's not native. Okay.
at all. But like as an example, one of the things that I have a database background. I started my life in IT as a DBA, as a database administrator. And with that, one of the things I wanted to do early on when I first started working here at PDQ.com was to find out and track how often on my test machines I was adding or removing programs. So I set up a few triggers on our tables in our database to track when those changed. Whenever the record was created, deleted, modified, whatever, any of the basic CRUD stuff, I had a trigger to record that somewhere. You could do a similar thing for when packages are created, possibly, but again, if you don't know the user, if it's not listed there, it's going to have a little more difficult time grabbing that.
We have discussed various for future releases. Adding more types of permissions where this person can create and this person can deploy, etc. That's not ready yet, but we are discussing that. For some reason, I want to say that I thought we started tracking who created a package but it's only visible in the database. I don't think we have a field for that.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add to that, Colpster?
I'm not aware of any audit information like that.
Okay. Sorry. So we'll go ahead and say dig into the SQL database if you want, but probably not then.
Yep.
Dear Shane and Chris, could it be possible to have custom fields in inventory that gets its information from a field or table of an external database? For example, computer owner. I have another application with an asset inventory and who has them assigned. It would be great to get some external info matching field computer name, for example. Hope that makes sense. Thanks, Federico D.
We don't interface with another database, but there is a way to do this. It's just when that other database is modified, it's not going to be automatically apparent here. But you're going to want to. I'll let Chris do it. You're going to want to. We have a little wizard.
Yes, we do.
So go ahead.
Okay, so here if you go into the computer details window here, I just clicked on Allen Rails here. On the custom fields section, there's a couple different spots up here for configure custom fields if you need to add them before you want to add data to them, populating with data. But then there's the import wizard button. If you click on this guy, it's going to walk you through pointing to like a CSV file and then defining where things go in your database for custom fields. You can do this through this interface. I believe we have a command line interface for this as well, which is my preferred way because guess what? PowerShell. If you do PowerShell and you have a separate database with this data, you could write a script or write something to say, hey, grab this data from this other database, massage it in any way that you need, clean it up, do the associations, and then pump it out into a CSV file, and then import it using the deploy command line interface, and voila.
It's just you have to match the computer with the value.
Correct.
So first and foremost, you have to create the actual custom value, whatever you're looking for.
Yep.
You have to create that, and then when you import it, then it has to be matched. I think it's a CSV.
Yeah.
Everything's going to have to. I'm going to take this opportunity before we take another question. We've got to talk about this new agent. It's our first release of the agent and some best practices, please. And that is, if you're using the agent, we highly recommend that you don't just blast the agent out to all your computers. Use the agent, if you're going to use this optional agent, use it sparingly on those computers that need it, particularly the ones that are remote. Don't throw it on all the computers in your organization that are internal. Certainly at this point, this is our first release. There are some scalability issues that we're working on, but I think we've got some customers that were really excited about this, and they blasted it to 1,000 computers, and that is just grinding their server down to just slow churn of butter.
Right, and so just one of the recommendations that we have is just start small for the ones that you need it and add to it and find out, make sure that the performance is still behaving the way that you would expect.
Yes.
Because we've had varying success from just a handful of agents to 100 to over 1,000 agents successfully for scanning, for deploying. And so it really depends on some stuff in your environment, some stuff, the actual machine itself, with the console for the hardware specs, whether it's a desktop OS versus a server OS, because the server OS allows far more connections incoming at the same time than a desktop OS. And so there's a lot of different limitations that are kind of hard to pinpoint, as well as a disk I/O.
Sure.
I mean, especially if you have these on VMs, virtual machines, that you can then assign that I/O or change it on the fly. Just be aware that this is something that you need to test in your environment while we're kind of still working out any of the kinks that we
Let's
have.
take a quick peek.
Oh.
I just if you do have a few agents out there, remember you can always click on this little button here to show to customize the grid. You can also go to View, Edit Columns, and we'll go down to Agent Status and add that, and then just move that up.
Yeah.
And there's the agent status. You can also just drag it right over there. And you can see the not installed, awesome. Those are going to scan just if they're internal, they're already on your network, you can access them the old way. That's what we'd recommend. But here we've got some, like Alan, Rails, and Beth, maybe those are laptops that go in and out. That's fine, that's internal. We've got a couple that are external, like here we've got Bob is external. So that, just use it sparingly. Don't blast this out right now. We're still working on the scalability issues of this optional agent. So use it where needed. That's really what we're stressing.
Right. If you do run into any problems, I mean, please do feel free to hit up our solutions team, or we'll help walk through what's going on. And any feedback that you guys have is going to be valuable at this point, because we're still constantly trying to improve. We're dipping our toes into this. We're just kind of getting this first version out, making sure we get all our ducks in a row, and then we're going to improve it.
Let's do a speed round of questions.
And it is time for the speed round. I'm trying to set up a deployment package for Office 365. The problem is that the typical install is tied to the user running the install. How do we get around this in PDQ Deploy? Thanks, Jeff C.
Well, that we actually have a webcast and some videos on deploying Office 365. So you're going to want to look at that, because there's two ways. First of all, you stage the installation, and then you use deploy just to push that out. There is a way around this. I'm assuming you're probably using the Microsoft intention of you make this available to the user to click it, and that user runs in that context. No, look up our webcasts for deploying Office 365, and that will answer your question 100%.
Yeah.
Dear Shane and Chris, I have a registry scanner that is actually working, and the value it's pulling is a date. Is there any way to create a report or collection with registry value greater than 7 days? Thanks, Tiffany G.
Sorry, Tiffany. I like that term, actually. Hey, this actually works. All right.
That's the best IT word right there.
So what's most likely happening is this reg value is a registering, and so it's the collections are going to see that as a string and not know to cast that or compare that as a date. A way around that, if you're talking about a collection, is not available as far as I know. But a report, you could do a SQL report, and in that SQL report, you can take that value and then basically cast that to a date and then compare against the date. So you had report/collection. You'd want to do this from a SQL report. If you have questions on that, might be able to help you out. Throw the question out to support. We don't write SQL queries for people generally, but we might be able to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, question. Colby, do you have any thoughts on this?
Jason Noonan tested this, and he basically came up with the same conclusion.
Okay. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Dear Shane's beard, how long have you been growing? Thanks, Mike B.
How long have you been growing out of the beard?
Apparently it's sentient now.
Yeah, it's been sentient since 2013.
Which came first, the beard or the Shane?
I started growing it in May of 12, and I know that because on May 1st, May 3rd, I went in for my driver's license, and I had the little teeny, George Michael shadow So it was like very, very end of May or April, early May of 12. And it's been this size it took me 2 years to get it this size. My barber keeps it at this size now, every month.
Okay, that's what I was going to point out is, I mean, he trims it. It's not like he's growing it down to his feet. He trims it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's...
My barber does.
Well, yes. I guess in this case, he was ambiguous.
He hates it.
But yeah.
Shane exchanges money for
Yes,
a beer
that's right.
drink.
Go ahead.
Dear Shane and Chris, how can you run a report on which computers do not have a specific application installed? Thanks, Don G.
Ah, yes, that's
a good
a
one.
great question. So what you're going to want to do, obviously, in inventory, it was a collection, right? So you're going to want to do this can be a little counterintuitive. So go ahead and say machines without, go ahead, I'll let you drive since you're by the keyboard. Machines without Chrome. Yeah, good. And then what you're going to want to do, this is where most people will say application and the name does not contain or does not equal. Don't do that.
There's a good reason for this. I want to point this out because every application that's not Chrome does not include the word Google Chrome in it. That's why.
And that's why you'll return, oh yeah, this machine has an application that is not called Google Chrome.
Yeah,
so what you want to do is use the filter like you were looking for it.
Yep,
in this case, like...
I'll just do contains in this case, but yeah.
Yeah, contains Google Chrome or something. But in your group filter, change that. It's by default an all to something like not all or not any.
Either one. Mm-hmm. So that's just right there.
By doing this, we're running this saying, hey, show me all the computers that have Chrome, and then strip those out and show me the ones that don't. So this is kind of the way you would do that, because the filters look at each single row returned. The group filters are where you can kind of do the similar to the having clause. So
no applications, no Chrome.
Now really quick, how do you show computers that have been scanned but don't have Chrome? Because if a machine hasn't been scanned, it's going to show up there. So go back into wherever
that collection just went. I am terrible at...
Just use the filter. Have you used this program before?
No.
Maybe you call it...
Oh my gosh, I put it... That's okay.
Right. So what you'd want to do is change that computer. There's a never scanned.
Yep.
Is true. So here, and then you would change this to a not any, right? So you could this depends on how you do this.
Right.
So it's never been scanned, and you could just change that to not any. So if either of those are not, if either of those return true, it's going to be stripped out. So now we've got these computers. Go ahead and open up like Hammer Eye or something like that, or Mr. Meeseeks or something.
Mr. Meeseeks. Look at
and
me.
You should see there's no Google Chrome. So that's how you do it. You use the group filters. Next.
Good question.
Dear Shane and Chris, finally got my updated PDQ licensing. Woohoo! Do you guys provide a subscription licensing that automatically renews yearly so I don't have to wait months dealing with the higher up so I can keep my PDQ software updated? Thanks, Jorlando D.
Well, you know what, Kelly, really quick, why don't you answer that one since that's your department?
Currently, we do not have that type of licensing, but it's something we may want to consider. That would be kind of cool, and if it will help you keep things up to date, Jorlando, we're all about making life easier for you.
Yep. Reach out to Kelly, and maybe we can make something work for you.
Yeah.
So.
And thanks for using our product.
Yeah, and occasionally we do have customers that say, hey, can I do this instead of a 1-year license? This is fairly rare, but like a 3-year, because this is how we do approvals. And we can often make exceptions to that.
Dear Shane and Chris, let's say you have multiple domains and different sites. At the head site, they want to see the inventory of what all is at the other sites. Would they need to have the agent on all of the outside sites? Thanks, Joshua E.
No.
No, I mean, it depends on if you can reach them from your head site. I mean, you got to make sure, I mean, I'm assuming you mean separate physical locations, but if you have like a site-to-site VPN, I mean, absolutely not, it's easy.
Or a site-to-site, you have a WAN. There's a lot of people that say, oh, I've got this remote office and this remote office. As long as, the file and print sharing is available, just like anything else, then no, you don't have to. If the agent, if there is no connection, then yeah, you might want to look at the agent. But once again, try not to throw the agent onto all of these other machines if they're really not needed, because you will tax your system. We've got to nail that down a little bit more. Right,
and one thing I do want to call out is in the preferences, if you're not using, and and you can, you should be using Active Directory sync. It just makes life easier, I promise. But with that, when you start including containers like that you want to sync, you can, in here, change domain and add multiple domains. So if I wanted to add some fancy domain, fancy domain, I'd have to add a user that has the ability to access that.
Yeah, if your current user can't do it, then you would specify one of the credentials that you've set up for that domain. And this is how it's done. This way, your Active Directory sync will go out to all these different domains, use the respective credentials, and all your machines will show up. And by default, when a machine is added from AD sync, it uses the scan user becomes whatever user imported that. You can change that after the fact, but that's just how it works.
Yep, and be aware that he's right there. You can change that, the user for what you're syncing for different things. So just a little word of advice. That's an awesome feature.
Dear Shane and Chris, I want to build a dynamic list of computers with a program installed below a specific version. In Application View, it will show PulseSecure version 9.nerd, PulseSecure nerd version 9.2 nerd, PulseSecure nerd version 2 nerd. How do I make PDQ Inventory search for all computers with PulseSecure installed below version 9.01151 and not return all computers because PulseSecure client ActiveX control is also on the computer? Thanks, Paul. Why?
Well done. Chris's phone just went off.
So remember that one time when I was on the webcast today and my phone went off? Yeah, that was a good time. But so moving on.
Great time. All right, what you're going to want to do is look at this from the comparisons point of view. If you're just saying contains PulseSecure, then it's going to grab anything that begins with PulseSecure and or contains that, whether it begins with it. If it has Pulse space secure, it's going to do it. You want to look at this from the comparison. So either use equals. You can also do, if you want to do Pulse, you could say, hey, this includes or contains Pulse secure, but another filter that says does not contain ActiveX.
Yeah.
And then have that set to all. That's the way you're going to want to attack this from the comparison. The equals should do it. If there is just one that says Pulse secure, then just do that. You can also do regular expressions. We won't go into that right now. There's a lot of ways around it. If you want to look at a regular expression, look at the built-in Microsoft Office collections. You'll see how we use a regular expression to strip out.
Yeah.
Say we're looking for Microsoft Office, but we don't want anything that says reader. Like they might have a Microsoft Office Word reader, so we strip out reader using a regular expression. So there's a number of ways, but the answer is via the comparison. You have a comparison that's way too lenient.
Yep, and so here, if I recall the question, there was a lot of numbers there, so I don't really pay attention to that. But name equals PulseSecure. You said you want to see the versions lower than a certain point. Well, in this case, you have version lower than, 9 or whatever it was. So this will show all versions that have an application that's called very explicitly PulseSecure with a version lower than 9.
Yep. If the ActiveX, if it's PulseSecure something, and you're going to want to narrow it down. But right now, you're probably using a contains or a start with, and it's just too lenient.
Yep, that's it. Great question.
And our final question of the day, Shane and Chris, for a PDQ rookie trying to learn. I know you have tons of videos and documentation, but what's the best path to learn how to use for my company to do what we need? I feel every article assumes I've used PDQ or an application like it, and it can be overwhelming. Thanks to Andre V.
Yeah, we do have some getting started. I'm not sure if you're beyond that point right now. But I would, if you haven't looked at those, I would look at the different getting started with PDQ Inventory, PDQ Deploy videos, and if you're still feeling like you're just swamped down, maybe narrow it down to just a couple of questions like, hey, I'm just overwhelmed. I need to deploy Microsoft Office, or I need to make sure to scan or run reports and send them to my manager every week or something.
Hey Shane,
reach out to us.
It's Lex. The playlists are a great one because they are set out from like beginner, starting installs and take you through all that. So, and the videos are short, so you can like cherry pick. I don't need the setup, but I need to move on beyond that.
Thanks.
Playlists are a great way.
Yeah, and I understand it can be quite overwhelming, but we do our videos are named very specifically. Not our webcast necessarily. Our videos, those are usually less than 5 minutes in length.
Yeah, so that's a good way to do it. And just like Shane mentioned, I mean, this is how I learned PowerShell. It's I need to do something. How do I do something? How do I do something with PowerShell? So, I mean, at this point, it's how do I deploy Office or whatever, and then you just start poking around until you figure out how to do it, look at the documentation, Googling for a video we might have, which we do, and just going that route. Or reach out to us if you have any questions. I mean, we're happy to help.
I would narrow it down. I would narrow it down via tasks, first of all.
Yeah.
I need to do this. And then just as you move along, you'll compile it. So thank you very much for all the questions, everybody. I'm Shane.
I'm Chris.
Chris with a K.
With a K, the best kind.
That's right. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks for joining our webcast today. Congratulations to Andre V. and Kyle A., winners of PDQ swag. Send us your info at webcast@pdq.com. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you back here next week.